Hey, my name is Scott Payne, and that is Lee Lambert. He's one of the founders of the PMP exam. Every single week, I interview Lee, and I have him explain the most complicated PMP topics and to give you practical advice that can build your project management career. So let's get into this. All right, Lee, today we're going to talk about how to be great in an interview, how to get a job as a project manager through an interview. So, are there some big things that jump out to you that PMs do poorly right off the bat when they're in interviews that can hold them back? Anything on the negative side that jumps out at you right at the bat?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things that need to be considered. Of course, there's so many variables in this regard. Are you applying for an external job? Are you applying for an internal promotion job? There's a variety of things that you've got to take into consideration. But if I use my experience as a basis,
Sure.
I never got a job that I was on paper qualified for. I mean, that's just the way it is. If you shoot low and you aim low in terms of just doing those things you absolutely know you can do, then you'll be stuck doing that the rest of your life. So what I basically did and suggest everyone does is do thorough research on not just the job content, but who the hiring manager is. My view is always, I want to know more about that individual than he or she knows about themselves. And when I get into an interview, I'm going to spend the first third of the interview figuring out a way to get them talking about themselves, because that's what they want to do. They want to tell you how great they are and how lucky you'll be to be working for them. So I want them to do that. I want them just to press the heck out of me. Then as I do that, I can start to pick up on things that are relevant to them in terms of importance for the job. Once I research the job, then I've got to be in a position where I understand it well enough to be confident that, yeah, okay, that's not exactly what I do, but what I do is so translatable to that particular environment that I think I'm the right person for the job. You've got to be in a situation where you can communicate how darn good you are without making it sound like you're telling them how darn good you are. And so you really have to demonstrate on past performance. I feel badly for the young people trying to break into the workforce in terms of project management, because we've created this stigma that if you don't have a Scrum Master or a PMP or some credential, then you must not really be that well qualified. And I think that's sad, because I think a lot of people, I spoke to a lady today back in DC, that her job, it's a weird thing, because I actually asked her, anticipating this, her job is that she runs all the projects, logistics, material, everything, all the projects that are done in Texas around Laredo to support the border control issues. I mean, and I said, man, you must be busy. And she said, it's nuts. Yeah. And I looked at her profile and I didn't see that qualification in there. And I just asked her, I said, how'd you get this job? I said, that doesn't seem to be a fit for what you've done in the past. And she said, well, I just saw this advertised and I thought about what I do and what I know. And I thought that'd be a perfect job for me. So she applied for it, and I'll be damned she didn't get it. And she's just a star performer. She's just doing an outstanding job. Most people don't have the courage to go for jobs they don't think they are personally capable of doing. And that's really a misunderstanding. If I'd have ever done that, I'd still be doing drafting work for General Electric. You got to just and you got to convince them. But then there's an upside, which it gets you in the door. The downside is that, hell, you got to perform.
Yeah.
And so you have to be confident that you can do that, or else you're putting your career on the line. I had one I had to stretch for, but we kind of pulled it through. But you start to think about you can do. I personally think there's no job I can't do. I mean, I want that level of confidence, and I think you have to make sure that you're careful to do a couple of things in the interview. Don't come across too confident, because as soon as you do, you cross the line and it becomes arrogance.
Yes.
And that's the last thing an employer wants, is some arrogant person thinking they know how to do everything. So you got to be you got to be humble, but you got to be precise and give examples. Give examples of things that you've done. They don't have to be in the working world. In fact, most of the examples I gave as I moved up the ranks in GE and the National Laboratory were really based on volunteer work that I had done. Unpaid volunteer work that demonstrated. I mean, when you run a I ran a thing called the Livermore Rodeo Parade. Okay. Doesn't sound like much, but it's a big event in Livermore, California, and they get 60 to 100,000 people, and you got to plan everything from who's scooping horse dung behind the horses to all the other things that are going on. And I'll tell you what, I personally, I really think I probably learned more about project management in that particular project than I would have learned in 10 years in the working world, because you had to do everything. You had to get involved in everything that was going on. So when I interview, I'm cocky. There's no doubt about that. I mean, that's because I don't think there's anything I can't do. I haven't tried brain surgery yet, but I mean, I'm sure that there are some things out there, but I want to come across that way. And unfortunately, again, and having been one of the founders of PMP, this probably sounds like blasphemy. I think there's some damn good project managers out there that don't have PMP. And I think, unfortunately, the screening process that have tried to make HR people's jobs easy says, well, if they don't have a PMP, they obviously aren't a project manager, and they discount them. And some of the best project managers get away. You never have a chance to get them in your group because they didn't have the PMP. Well, I think we need to be careful with those credential standards. I mean, everybody knows it opens the door stays open unless you don't perform, and then you go back out the door. So I know, I mean, 1.2 million with the PMP, that's great, but probably I used to use the number 300,000. It's probably 300,000. I'm going to manage their way out of a paper bag. They're darn good test takers. And so you got to be careful. You got to, and if I'm on the other side of the table, if I'm interviewing a prospective, I'm going to give them very specific examples and ask how they would respond. How would you deal with this situation? That's how you're going to get to the truth. I mean, the book learner's there. I mean, we can do that without a problem. But throw me into a real situation. I mean, throw me into a situation where I have to be able to get volunteers. These are high-level business people in the community, get volunteers to walk behind horses with shovels and wheelbarrows, shoveling up dung. I mean, if you can do that, you're pretty influential. I think we have to look at those specifics of how we get that particular message across to the people in the organization. My first management job I got, and I was no more qualified than you. There was no way I should have got that job. But I had a great interview, talked the guy into, and in fact, he talked for a 2-hour interview. He talked for an hour about himself. And it was awesome. It saved me an hour of having to figure out what the hell am I going to say. And so as soon as I knew that, then I pinpointed the things that was going to light him up, and we lit him up, and I got the job. And fortunately, he gave me an opportunity to perform. So I think everybody that's going to be looking for a project management opportunity needs to really recognize that most of us are doing project management in our daily life on a regular basis. This is not, I mean, you just understand after a while, probably after you get burned a few times, that's what happened to me. That you begin to realize, hey, there's a process here that we ought to be following, whether this is my money or my organization's money. We ought to be following these processes. Once you come to grips with that, then moving into project management, I don't think there's anybody that couldn't be one if they made up their mind to do what they needed to do. So I think, and the other thing is, I don't believe, and this is more blasphemy coming from Lee Lambert. I don't believe I would ever hire from outside. I hire from inside. I post jobs from the inside. I get people who are looking for growth opportunities. That's going to make them be motivated and excited about the opportunity. Rarely do I ever think about hiring from outside. Inside,
always inside you first, I guess, right?
Inside first. Exactly.
Yeah, that's great. And so a couple of things that you hit on, I think, are super important. Like a lot of times like when I've been on both sides of the interviews, when you're early on in your career, it feels like you have to do all the talking. You have to sell yourself, blah, 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 fill up all that air. But you just flipped it on them and told everybody, hey, and I agree 100%, that let me try to find something that they can talk about so that they can get,
Absolutely.
what they want to do. Like they like talking about themselves. Do you think that like if you're doing the internal thing, we can start thinking ahead of it and start working on those people beforehand? Like if we're start developing relationships with the hiring people, the departments, whatever, even not even asking for anything, like maybe 3 months before or 6 months before, whatever, just trying, would you recommend that they start developing relationships higher up so that maybe it pays off during,
I do believe that, but there's a caution I want to give you.
Okay.
Is when you hire from inside, when you post a job and people respond and you hire someone from another department, for example, you run the risk of alienating that department head. I had a case where it's still just, I mean, it really just burns me when I think about it. But I was hiring to start up basically a PMO. We didn't call it that. We call it MIS for a national laboratory. So I post jobs. I said, come, we're doing the PMO thing. We're just what if you're interested, give me a call. Let's talk. So sure enough, I started getting responses from people internally. And one of the people that I got a response from was a world-class PhD geologist. I mean, she was known throughout the world as a geologist, and so she ended up coming to work for me. Okay, I said, why do you want to do this? She said, well, I want to do something new and different, and I think I'm good at it. So I ended up hiring her. I'll use her name because she's very famous now, Robin Madison. I feel like I'm close to her. I haven't talked to her in 30 years, but she's risen to the top. I mean, she's big time. And so I hired her. And I was very proud. I thought, God, that's awesome that somebody of that ilk would be interested in becoming a project manager. And so she'd been on the job about a week, and I got a call from the director of the lab, and he said, I need to talk to you. So I went in and I said, yeah, what's up? And he said, I'll tell you what's up. He said, we're getting some real serious complaints from the technical departments. I said, what do you mean complaints? And he said, well, they're complaining you're stealing all their good people. And I said, what? He said, yeah. He said, the geology guy was in here a minute ago, just ranting and raving. He stole his best geologist. And I said, well, for one thing, I didn't steal anybody. I posted a job. She made a decision she wanted to apply. I made a decision she's a good fit. So I hired her. So, but I said, I think you're right. I think the geology guy's definitely right on target. There is a problem. Yeah, there's a heck of a big problem. Is that they can't create an environment where the people want to stay. That's the problem. And he thought about that for me. He said, well, I guess really that's right. I mean, you don't want people staying in jobs that they're not motivated, that they're not inspired. And so that was my job, was giving people an opportunity to do something they may never have had a chance to do again. So I really think you got to be careful. But the relationship side, remember, relationships are what it's all about. You can give me all the damn scheduling systems you want. It's all about relationship. And so if you build those relationships, well, that's and I hadn't done that. I mean, I've learned since then. I hadn't built a relationship with a geology director, but I would have if I'd have realized that people out of his department were going to apply. Because you need to understand, I don't think, I am personally not for keeping people in a job if they're not happy doing. I think their productivity sometimes can cut in half. You can get 50% productivity, or if I put them in a job they're excited about, I'm going to get 110, 120% productivity. So, but you got to build those relationships. You're exactly right. I would spend time managing up. They like to use that term, but I would spend time sucking up, is a term I use, to the higher level
in
people.
the right way, because you played off the
course.
example of like not being cocky, but being confident and like humble in a way. Same thing. Like I know you say sucking up, but like interested or engaged. Or, I don't know what the good words are, but yeah.
Well, you have to. Here's what I tell people. They laugh and they say, well, that's never going to get you anywhere. And I probably would argue that. What I do that I think is so important, and it really fits in everything we're talking about, is I want to create the illusion that I'm interested. Okay. And once I do that, then you and I have a connection. You see,
Yes.
we have a connection, and we can build on that connection, even though it wasn't real. I mean, I don't really give a rip about what we're talking, but I want to create the illusion
Right.
that we did. And so, and the beauty of that is once you've created that and you get the entree into the association, then you can build that into reality. Then it
Yeah.
can become not just an illusion; it can become the real deal. And
Mhm.
that's kind of that's half of the fun of working in an organization. I haven't worked in an organization since 1984, so maybe it's changed.
Yeah.
But half the fun for me was building those relationships. I mean,
Sure.
walking around the hallway, stopping in, shooting a breeze. I mean, that to me is how you get ahead in the world, is through the relationships, and you build them. And when those people move up, guess what? It's like a drafting effect. They suck you right behind them.
That's awesome. The other thing you said, like you emphasized heavily about don't just think that you have to have this perfect practical work experience where you built the Golden Gate Bridge or something like that. You can leverage off, a volunteer experience, but you want to make it real and relatable and those kind of things. Some of the things I've seen as well is like while people are working, like I know most people have full-time everything jobs, but sometimes with those other people, one of the ways I got in early was I was like, hey, I'll go to these process improvement people or the project people and say, whatever you can, could I do things afterward? Could I do anything for you? Lunchtime, anything like to help and try to sell yourself in that way, just to not hoping to get anything, but just to prove a teensy bit. So I think that might align with what you're saying, just to kind of use every opportunity
Yeah,
that you
yeah,
have.
that's a perfect way to look at it. If I'm going to, the word volunteer can be used in a lot of ways. If
Mhm.
I'm going to volunteer to do something, I expect to get something out of it, and if it's knowledge, that's fine.
Sure.
And that impresses people. Why you want to do that? And I said, well, it's just something I want to learn. It's something I want to make sure I understand. And all of a sudden, respect starts to grow for you. I kind of screwed it up a little bit. I got overzealous
Okay.
on the volunteering thing. And I was working for GE, and at the same time, I was president of the JC organization, and it was a big deal back in
Yeah.
those days. And volunteer, the more you volunteer, the more they want you to volunteer. And pretty soon they suck you in where you don't have a minute of your own time.
Sure.
Well, I found out the only way I was going to be able to do the job that I thought I should do as president of JC's is to do a lot of that stuff at work. And so I started doing a lot of volunteer work
At work.
at
Yeah.
work, and I was on the phone, and finally, after about 6 months of it, I worked for a guy named Pedro, Peter Pedro. What an odd name. He For some reason he wasn't into the whole volunteer thing.
Yeah.
He thought when I was there I was supposed to be doing GE work, and so he was obviously confused.
Yeah.
And so
Obviously. Yeah.
I ran some really national projects without never leaving my office at GE. And eventually he kind of I mean, he warned me a couple of times, but I was young. And so I
Mhm.
kept doing it. Well, eventually he didn't fire me, never been fired. Well, maybe once. Haven't been fired a lot of times, but he didn't fire me, but he did drop in for the third time and suggest that I transfer
Oh, there you go.
to another organization. And so, things that seemed bad at the time turned out fine. So I transferred down to Sunnyvale, California, got involved in earned value, and the rest is history on project management. So,
Love it.
so you gotta do what you gotta do. I don't endorse wasting work time. When you're getting
Agreed.
paid to work, you ought
Agreed.
to you ought to work. So I don't endorse that. I don't misunderstand what I'm saying, but I do know that what I learned in that volunteer role
Mhm.
really spelled the difference in my career.
Mhm.
Almost everything I've been successful at, I really learned initially running volunteer organizations.
Yeah, that's really, really great. Now, we talked a lot about how an individual who's looking to move up is that like could present themselves and navigate. The other thing is like I know that certain companies they have very stringent rules about must be PMP, must have this and stuff. But once they get in there, what kind of things would you have to say to the individuals sitting on the other side of the desk who are making the decision that in the past may have just gone off that? Well, I said I need a PMP. Said I need 4 years experience. Like where do you fall in like the diversity of thought? I think you've talked a little bit about with the geology, but like what kind of push would you have against those people to say to open themselves up to higher difference or what?
I think that there's a risk on the hiring manager's part it's a very risky job
Yes.
because the person who's the most qualified on paper is often not the person that's the most qualified to get the job done. And
Yes.
so the hiring manager has a real tough job in trying to see through what's real and what's Memorex, if that
Mhm.
dates me a little bit. But you got to understand that's something that I have to do. That's where these specific questions
Mhm.
come in terms of cases. Give them a case. Ask them what they would do, and once you do a couple of those, you'll know real quickly
Mhm.
what their real capability is. I mean, you can interview a PMP and feel that they really don't understand project management that well, or you
Mhm.
can interview a non-PMP and go, man, this guy really got it. He really understands.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, we create these arbitrary barriers
Mhm.
of requirements that miss a lot of good people. And
Mhm.
so once if you here's what I do. If you gave me the job, the first thing I'm going to do is find out what organizational objectives are important to you.
Sure.
What is it that you need to get accomplished to make you be recognized as successful? And once I find that out, hell, I'm going to do whatever I can to make that happen. That's where
Yeah.
the volunteering that you mentioned, I'm going to go. When this earned value stuff came up, I went into the CEO of that particular division, and I said, "Hey, listen, I'm not crazy about this engineering work, and this earned value thing sounds like it might be interesting. I'd love to get to know what that's all about." And hell, nobody else wanted to do it. Everybody wants to stay in engineering. And
Yeah.
so that was an opportunity because I knew we had to get a government validation. We had to go through a demonstration review to get validated. Nobody wanted to take that risk. And
Yeah.
so I thought, well, why not? I mean, I didn't like engineering at all. I mean, that's so almost anything would have been better than what I was doing.
There you go.
And so that's something that the support of the objectives. My
Mhm.
last job before I actually was fired for the first time in 1984 was working directly for the CEO of the largest contract research organization in the world. And the first thing I did, although he was a friend, we lived next to each other, our kids went to school. I mean, there was some
Mhm.
commonality there. But the first thing I did was find out what are the three most important things that you need to accomplish in the next year, and then I spent almost all my time making sure that happened.
Yeah. I think
And
that's
and that's what you want. That's you want people need to understand your job description is just an HR function
yes.
fill to fill a form essentially. You're not limited to that. That's basics, but you're not limited to that. You're only limited by what you're willing to risk in the terms of performance.
Right. And yeah, and after a couple of weeks of talking, Lee, like I get the feeling that in these organizations, you were kind of an entrepreneur in the organizations. Did you feel like that as you went through this? Because you
Oh
were.
yeah, I mean that's kind of the way I ran my career because of volunteering. I learned like when I got the first manager's job, that was I was going against one PhD, one master's degree, and me. I no, there wasn't a chance in hell. But because I pursued that in an entrepreneurial way, the other two guys fell by the wayside. And
Mhm.
every position I got as I moved up the chain was based on the same kind of an approach.
Mhm.
Find out what can be done, find out what needs to be done, and then figure out a way to do it. And once you do that, I mean, it's smooth sailing.
Yeah, and I
I
think
have a
it's.
chance to counsel people on these
Yeah.
LinkedIn things all the time, and I'm amazed at how many people actually feel like they're limited in what they can do. They actually feel, "Oh, I'm totally constrained. I can't." Well, come on, get over it, break out of it, take a risk or two. I mean, what the heck? There's plenty of jobs out there.
Right.
And so you gotta be willing to take a risk. You can't if you only apply for the jobs you know you can absolutely do. It's gonna be a boring career.
I love it. And then also, like as you're painting these pictures, it feels like you're finding out where the flow of the organization is, where like the jet stream is, and you're saying, I don't care where it's going, I'm getting in it. Like I got to know where it is, and I'm going to get into that to let it take me where it is. Much harder to go against the wind and say, well, I just want to be the next level of engineer. Well, they might not prioritize that. They might not have positions open, but there might be EVM or earn value or something like, okay, cool. I'm going to get in that. Zoom. I'm going to go up and I'm going to figure it out. So
Yeah, you have to, to me, you have to surround yourself with winners.
okay.
So find out who the winners are and build relationships with them, because the winners go up. The losers stay level or go down. So suck up to the winners. Get in a position where you can build a relationship with the winners, you know. And when you do that, even though they may not agree with what you say, they trust you, they believe in you. And the next thing you know, you got opportunities to really have an impact on the organization.
I think that's really, really great. So I think people have a lot to go off right now. If they, you know, there's first of all, if I summarize, there's zero excuse for moving up. It's not that it's easy and it's not that it's overnight, but if you use a lot of the things that you're talking about over time, you take these risks, calculated as they are, that you're going to have a better chance of moving up instead of just sitting and waiting and thinking the organization's caring about you in a sense. Like,
Yeah, let me make a point here, because I think
yeah.
that's a good. My rule of thumb was I never stayed in a job more than 3 years. If
Okay.
you stay in a job more than 3 years, you're not being as productive as you could be. So that idea of staying in a job and stability and dedication, that's crap. So 3 years, you should know everything there is to know about that job. You're ready for the next one.
Ready for the next one. Yeah, you got to sell yourself into the next one. All right, Lee, this is really, really good. This is another awesome like walkthrough. I think people, if they take these actions, you know, boom, 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 they'll be in a better job before they know it, and one that they can serve better in the organization. So I really, really appreciate it. And next week we'll hit another topic. Thanks,
My
man.
pleasure. Looking
Yes, sir.
forward to it.
Thank
Take
you,
care,
Lee.
Scott.
You too.